Honey, I blew up the business.
Welcome to the podcast. Mark Bryant, good to see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me on here, Daniel.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure. We've got a cracking podcast in store for you today. There's so much good stuff to go through. For those of you who haven't listened to the podcast before, the mission of this podcast is to help entrepreneurs not do what I did in 2017, which was blow up my business through a series of bad habits and silly sort of ego-y ways of getting on. I managed to flame my business and my life. And I've turned it around, and the business is still going and it is growing now. It's a successful business and my life has turned around, but it was a close call. So my mission through the podcast is to speak to great entrepreneurs like Mark today to help you learn how not to do what I was doing. So we've got a great chat today because Mark, you've been an entrepreneur for quite a while, haven't you? Since you started early.
Since I was at the first business at university, bringing cigarettes back from the Middle East and selling them to my friends, which then morphed into selling the freshers of '96 for Exeter University. That was my first project.
Really? So you were like kind of back in at uni doing deals. And it's ironic now, considering your career as a wellness entrepreneur, that you started out selling cigarettes. That's quite funny.
I know. I wasn't a smoker at the time, but then after 2 years at university, it got me. Bad habits and all that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, so after university, Mark went into the energy efficiency industry, owning and managing companies that range from £1 million turnover through to 15 million. But in 2015, it was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which I think I've pronounced correctly.
Perfect.
And he was considered to have a terminal illness with a life expectancy of 6 months. And I've checked my calendar, and 2015 plus 6 months was a long time ago. So you're still here.
I am. Well, I was diagnosed with leukemia in 2015. Immediately thrown into a very intensive treatment protocol, which is the most intensive treatment protocol humans are exposed to in the cancer world, which involved 2 months of very intense chemotherapy, 4 days of full body radiation, where they turn the machine on its side and spray it through a big Perspex shield. And then I'm in isolation for 3 weeks without seeing my family or anybody other than my wife was allowed in and the nurses, and one or two guests that I could, or not guests, but friends or family that I could nominate to come in and see me because I was in such a vulnerable position. And on that 4th day of the radiotherapy, I had my brother's stem cells. So the therapy for me was a stem cell transplant. Fast forward 6 months, routine test, got a call to say, Mark, don't come in that day. Can you come in as soon as possible? And then the doctor told me that, look, Mark, it's coming back. And I knew it was coming back. You know, it was almost like I had that feeling that morning. There's a video of me sharing on the top of a little hill that is near my house, saying that you have to appreciate every freaking day and you never know when your last day is going to be. And I kind of knew that I was going in to have some bad news. And I told the oncologist, don't tell me the revised prognosis. I just want to focus on getting well. And he was like, are you sure? And then we went back the week later to have a follow-up consultation with my wife this time because I was on my own. And he was like, are you sure? You're sure you don't want the revised prognosis? I'm like, I'm absolutely sure. I'm just going to focus on getting well. Fast forward 6 months. I was not well because I had a side effect to my brother's stem cells. I had some more of his cells and I had graft-versus-host. Man down, completely depleted of energy, business, income, everything was just falling apart around me. And I was in desperation lying on the sofa. And at 11 o'clock at night, I thought, hang on a sec, maybe my life insurance covers me for something other than death. And in the terms that I went and dug out of my filing cabinet, it says that it covered me for terminal illness. I was like, wow, what's that? And I had to wait a whole week until my oncologist came back from holiday. And he phoned me up. He said, you want me to write you off? And I was like, yep. And then I went about claiming my own life insurance.
Wow.
But at that point, I'd got to 6 months and I was like, look, I'm doing so well. I'd found a lifestyle. I'd made some massive change. And so I had this belief that I was going to make it. So I almost felt a little bit fraudulent claiming the life insurance on the inside, knowing I was going to still be here today.
Mm. Wow. What a set of circumstances. But I mean, looking back, it's just incredible. And then you are training for a half Ironman, I believe. And so we're going to get into all this detail because I'm going to unpack some of this because there's some of the nuances to the story, which I think is really interesting. But he's now a fitness and wellness entrepreneur with the Fast brand, which has a number of iterations where we can get into. But he's a keynote speaker, an educator, I would say, on nutrition, mindset, fitness, a whole bunch of stuff on YouTube, online, but also as a podcast host at his podcast Terminal to Triathlon, which I've been listening to because I'm getting into endurance sports, doing a lot of ultra running actually. So I've been interested in nutrition and resilience and going long distances. So I'm kind of interested in this sort of stuff. And so there's loads of good stuff to unpack now. I'm really excited to get into it. But before I sort of forget, if you do like this kind of thing and you want to help me on my mission, please share with people. It's great if you could share, like, review the podcast. It really helps us get our message out and really help other people. And we're getting some great feedback from the listeners about the impact it's having on their lives, on their work lives, and just in general. So if you want to help, just give it a share. Right, so we're going to kick off. I'm going to go back in time, pre-cancer diagnosis, because there was a whole bunch of stuff going on with you at the start of let's call it the 20 teens, where you'd had this decade after being a sort of university entrepreneur. You're now an entrepreneur in this in energy efficiency field. And you get to sort of 2010, 2011, but things didn't go great. Could you just give us an insight what's happening with you in sort of circa 2012?
Yeah, I think I left uni and then I kind of made my own way. I ended up working for a local plumbing and heating contractor after I had a spell with a franchise. So first proper job was helping my dad run a region of a franchise. And he bought into that, having moved back from the Middle East. And then a few years into it, I was like, I just can't see how we're ever going to make money at a management level of the franchise. And anyway, I tried to get all the franchisees to buy at the franchisor. And there was private investigators. So first, and then we got kicked out of the franchise. And being a young, ambitious individual that I was in my early 20s, I already had somebody that I knew quite well who had a plumbing company, small, local in Prestatyn in North Wales. And I said, look, you can't afford to pay me a good salary. Give me 25% of the company and I'll come and work for you for minimum wage. That was my first entrepreneurial endeavor. Or like proper job post uni, if that made sense. So then, yeah, I was in that sector, plumbing, heating. It developed into decent homes, social housing, helping vulnerable households get access to heating through grants. And then it developed into insulation. So I graduated back in 2001. So 10 years later, around 2008, I started to do self-development. So I'd had this period where I hadn't done anything. And then in 2008, leadership management training came into North Wales. And I started to unpick some of those bad habits that you talk about and realized that, there was a number of areas of my life that I was not happy. And in 2010, I went to a Tony Robbins UPW. And it was in that event, I was standing next to who then was my business partner, one of the three. And I said, I would need to get out of business with him. And fast forward 12 months later, started to look into the accounts and we'd been defrauded out of a significant sum of money. And at that point, my other business partner was semi-retired, dealing with a health challenge. And he was kind of my mentor. And I had to then bring to the table some of the misgivings that had been going on within our company or group of companies as it was at the time. And that was an extremely challenging time. We lost 3 or 4 businesses. We had one surviving business, and myself and my business partner, John, were left with a £500,000 personal guarantee. And we had to just go with the one surviving company we had. And it was at that point, one thing I did buy and invest was Tony Robbins' Mastery University. So during this very, very challenging time, I was continuing my self-development through life mastery, business mastery, wealth mastery, and an upgraded version of Mark was slowly coming to the surface. And I'd managed to rebuild our company from 3 to 6 to what was 12 million. And then I was diagnosed with leukemia. So yeah, that was a very, very, very challenging time of my life.
So this was a period of from 2012 through 15. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 years there where, when going through the list here, you've got, well, you're going into business with some people. You find that that's not working. You then realize there's criminal activity, fraud going on in the business.
Correct.
That then leads to, out of a group of companies, 3 out of 4 going pop. Then there's you're on the hook for a load of money, personally. So that's pretty dramatic.
I lost my mum in 2013 as well at 59.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that's okay. So in the mix, that's gone in.
Mm-hmm. And
this is before the cancer diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to slow this down a little bit, because I'm kind of, so this is, so how are you feeling? Let's say 2013. Okay, 2014, you're in the thick of this. How are you feeling at that point?
What was interesting, 2010 and 11 were horrendous. Yeah, dealing with the fallout of what we'd uncovered. And then piecing that whole jigsaw back together. We had HMRC investigations. We weren't struck off as directors. There was a lot of intense activity, but because I'd been in a similar industry or the same industry for quite a number of years, we had a good reputation. So our customers trusted us, and we did a good job. And there was some new initiatives that were being launched called Eco Energy Company Obligation, and there was huge opportunity for people in the right place at the right time, and we were one of those people in the right place in the right time. And so we brought into what we were doing, plumbing, heating, insulation, and that was all centered around helping vulnerable households get access to more efficient homes. So we managed to secure some really good funding, and that's where that rate of growth came from at that time. So on some levels, I was on cloud 9, but there was still, looking back, I knew that there was some inner disconnection within me, because I wasn't truly doing and living who Mark Bryant should be. I was living who Mark Bryant, who I thought everybody else wanted me to be. And at that time, Eco was great in the early days. We'd grown significantly. I had my brother, my dad, my stepdad, my sister, 2 of my best mates working for me. We were navigating significant change, because one thing I can guarantee you the government do in many ways is where they say, it's insulation focused and all that. You're then growing in the insulation sector. It's heating focused. So you're constantly having to reinvent yourself. And the contracts were only 6 to 12 months maximum. And so there was no longevity in that model. It was great at the time, but the stress was significant. And I didn't know how I was going to save the company, And I think the pressure of, I looking back, I know I had mental health issues because I wasn't able to express the depth of my despair. I didn't know how to communicate that. Mental health is a lot more. Is a lot more public nowadays, and the power of vulnerability is so important, and the power of psychotherapy and healing and everything else is so important. But at the time, I just thought I should have pulled the parachute cord as opposed to trying to get at the top. But at the beginning of 2015, I'd asked my business partner if I could buy him out in reality, what I should have said is I want out. So all I've done is I just put even more pressure on myself whilst having the responsibility of my kids. And it's hardly surprising that, 5-6 months later, I was diagnosed with leukemia.
So did you connect the diagnosis with the lifestyle you were living?
The emotional stress I was under. Lifestyle, if you looked at me, I was the healthy guy. I was the guy that drank green juice. I was the guy that went for runs on the weekend. I was the guy that people saw as, the healthy, successful, drove a nice car. On the outside, everything looked great. You had a wife, gorgeous wife, 2 beautiful kids. But on the inside, I was crumbling.
So this it's interesting here. This sort of bit 24. I can relate to a lot of this because I've been through this sort of arc of dealing with mental health issues. I was diagnosed with depression, and nobody. In fact, this took me like years through the noughties to get anywhere near this, because I was just told that you were tired. You're working a lot, take a holiday, by the doctor. So I was kind of like wrestling with a lot of this stuff, but I was being driven by these external things. So I can totally empathize with you. But this sort of period of when you're sort of 2014 and you've pulled your business out and you've got out of this business catastrophe, and so you said you have this inner dissonance, like you're crumbling on the
disconnection,
inside. Yeah. So perhaps you can see that more clearly now. But at the time, how was that kind of playing out? I mean, again, how did it feel in that moment?
Unshared stress, and so unshared stress is pressure, and pressure inside the body is bad chemistry, and bad chemistry is bad health. From a very high level science perspective, flying back from Dubai, February 2015, on a plane, just stayed at the Ritz-Carlton. We'd been and had a wonderful holiday. And I just wasn't there. I've got pictures of me kissing dolphins with the kids, and I just wasn't present. This is, good question. And I leant across the plane. I said, Fiona, I feel disconnected. And the wife is going, what the hell's wrong with me? You've got a beautiful kids. You've got me. You've got an amazing business. I'm like, fuck, she doesn't get it. Yeah. And I then put my headphones back on and I started listening to Tony Robbins' Time of Your Life, trying to paper over the cracks, put the plaster on, and just get up and keep going. Yeah. And that was a few months before my world, it didn't come crashing down, we went to Monaco to the Grand Prix in May. I think that's the time the event was. I was diagnosed in June, and we went out, and I went out with my friends. I got really, we had a good night. And what was interesting looking back, it took me a whole week to recover. And, you think, well, I'm in my mid-30s at the time, maybe hangovers are not as what they used to be. But it was clear to see that my immune system and my recovery, my state of inner health was deteriorating. Yeah. Which then turned into lethargy, tiredness, to the point where I was trying to launch a new division of the company. So I delivered the regional training for the sales team in North Wales, but not in Yorkshire. And the Yorkshire manager was like, Mark, you need to come and do this because we need to act on this fast. And I'm like, okay, I'll be there. Set the date. And on the Tuesday, I went to the kids' sports day. And I remember sitting there thinking, how the hell am I going to get off my arse and get in the car and drive 2-3 hours over to Yorkshire with the chronic back pain I've now got? And it'd been with me for a few days then. And then I said to my wife, the back of the house was coming off because we're having an extension as well. Just to add to the pressure.
Add a little bit extra, yeah.
She's like, Mark, don't go. You're exhausted. You've got back pain. Just cancel it. I was like, I cannot cancel it. Surrender, giving in. No, it's not in my vocabulary. Keep going. And then I got in the car. I stopped off at the A&E on the way to Yorkshire to see what the wait time was for some higher painkillers than what you can get over the counter. 4 hours. I was like, sack that. Got to the hotel. And then the back pain just got increasingly worse, to the point I phoned an ambulance and they came and picked me up. And then the next day, that night, they took bloods, and I was like, why are you taking bloods? Just give me painkillers. That's all I need. I've got to deliver training tomorrow.
Yeah.
And what was going through my head is I've been on all-nighters and I've gone to work the next day. I can do this.
Mm.
And then the doctor came in and he said, Mark, you need to stay in because your bloods aren't right. And it was at that point I was like, well, that's what they said about my mum. So the brain starts ticking then. Wow. And then I said to the nurse, you know, the painkiller, morphine, the hardest one you told me about 2 hours ago, bring it in. I'm ready for it. And then it was about five in the morning. I text the guys that were coming to the training. I said, cancel the training. Didn't tell anybody else where I was. Didn't tell them I was in hospital. And I just said, the training's off. I'll give you all a call later. And I messaged one of my friends and said, get your ass to Barnsley Hospital. Don't tell anybody where you are. And he was my regional manager, one of my best mates, Roy. And I just got injected with morphine and pain suddenly subsided. So when I was told about having leukemia, I was off my head on morphine. So when I think back, it wasn't like I didn't drop into panic stations and, oh shit, my head just went, okay, how do we solve the problem? You know, there was like everything I cared that I used to care about, I suddenly didn't care about because the only thing that mattered was my health. And yeah.
Is that through the looking glass, go through the sort of into this other dimension suddenly? So you kind of almost, even when you were in the hospital, you were isolating yourself from others. You were just cutting yourself off and being this kind of superhuman.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is all part of the emotional healing, you know, and this is all part of the emotional healing work that to some degree it takes time to heal some of that programming that happened pre-life, early life, memories that we can't even remember, and they're just imprinted memories within our body. So unless we learn how to feel more fully, and it's almost like I imagine emotional fitness is each emotion is like its different note: love, anger, fear, rage. And they're all good because kids have all of those. They have joy, they have happiness, they have a full vocabulary of emotions, sadness, crying. And as we grow up, we learn how to suppress those emotions that we're not meant to feel. So all of the work I've done is really developing and learning how to feel the full spectrum of emotions that we have available as humans. And yeah.
And this, on this particular point, I'm really interested to focus on, because Mark talks publicly, very openly about his all these issues. And he's talked about emotional fitness. And it's something that, you know, we've talked a little bit here about the mind and the body, and I think this idea of, we know about mental fitness. That's more of a thing now, like mental health and going for a run. Yes, we know we should do that kind of thing, but the emotional fitness and this idea of being connected to those emotions, what about that is important, do you think, for an entrepreneur?
To be true to themselves, to speak their authentic truth, so they are moving in a direction that they want to go in, not a direction that they're going in because somebody else wants them to do that, or that's what they think anyway, you know? And so it's being authentic with our emotions. And emotional fitness, when we deliver resilience and wellbeing training, it is resilience and wellbeing is a measure, or emotional fitness is a measure of resilience. You know? And so when we're talking about mental health is about being okay in depression and okay in anxiety. You know, they're just perfectly normal human conditions that signal when we need to change something. You know, like this last few months, I've felt I've allowed myself to feel depressed and not tried to tell myself I'm not, because I'm feeling at the moment quite overwhelmed with again, the level of responsibility that I have, or that I put on myself. I'll give you a reason for that is because I had another relapse before Christmas.
Okay.
So then it's a case of, well, now I'm trying to work. My life insurance wasn't enough to give me full financial freedom and go in and participate in some of the health treatments that I've already spent over 400,000 doing over in America with an oncologist over there. And so the last 4 months, as well as deciding on what my career and to generate an income to keep my kids and my family in the right place, is also looking at what strategy I'm going to use to finally put this sleeping rattlesnake to sleep in my immune system, which is the leukemia.
Yeah, the weight of responsibility is quite a thing. And for what it's worth, I've been feeling this today. I'm a father. We've got a new house. Got to get a mortgage. The mortgage is coming through. There's a business. There's challenges. There's this. There's that. Some stuff comes in that isn't going to plan. What about this? I've just been like, you feel overwhelmed. You said it, right? So yesterday I was like, I'm feeling this is a bit on top. And then I got really upset about something, just into family thing, really defensive, a bit sort of, again, my emotional state was just pinging. And I thought, yeah, God, I'm just feeling it now. This and the pressure and the weight and the sense of responsibility. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs want that. Yeah. And it's just a real paradoxical situation because you want that and you search for it and you find it and you adopt it. But then at the same time, there's the sort of yin to the yang, as it were, where you're having to then on your off days or when like you get your relapse or the information about that, or something goes wrong in the business or somebody doesn't pay you on time and it makes your cash flow difficult. All those practical things. And suddenly it's like a bit of a house of cards psychologically. Well, I find. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I'm not enjoying it anymore. This is a pain. So I'm sure this is something I can respond to. How do you approach coping with those kinds of situations?
For me, because I am rewriting my future chapters, I'm at such a pivotal change in my life that being really doing the work, I've got an amazing therapist that I'm working with now who is helping me unpick some of the, some of the deepest work I have done is been going on over the last few months, and it's telling myself the right story, not dramatizing things. You talked about the yin and the yang. Like one of my questions at the minute is, what's the opposite? Really tuning into what I want right now, because and not stacking pressure on pressure, because and slowing everything down. Like that's one of my other things I've done over the last 3 or 4 months is really slowing everything down and not going so fast, even though my company with my business partner is called Fast Way to Fitness.
The irony.
Like, what's the opposite? Like that's a great question for me at the minute. It's like, what's the opposite?
And so can you give me an example of how that would, what sort of, so you're thinking about something and you say, what's the opposite? In what context would you use that question? Like
we live in a world of duality, the yin, the yang, the hot and the cold, the slow and the fast. And, I'm some of my programs stuck in fast, fight or flight. Yeah. Well, I nearly said it, but yeah, you're just always on the go. And that's quite a lot of societal conditioning. Is it go, 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 go? And so for me, is that when I find myself getting trapped in that pattern, it's like, Mark, whoa, slow down. What's the opposite? Yeah. And the opposite could be, and it's permission as well. Because as I'm trying to work, heal and live, whereas before, when I was diagnosed with leukemia, all I had to think about was healing. Nothing else mattered. Whereas now I've got three three areas that I need to look at. Because, you know, if you speak to my wife, she'd probably, you were just thinking about yourself. In reality, on some level, I was definitely thinking about myself. Like, you put that mask on and you find a way to solve this problem, Mark. And she felt probably isolated and lonely and worried about what was going on to the nth degree. But for me, I was just focused on getting well. And I did what it took, you know. So anyway, so that's kind of, hopefully that's one example, is like, if I'm going too fast, like, what's the opposite to this? And again, it's the same. We had a massive change in our business 2 weeks ago, and there was a few options, because I wasn't operational at Fast 2-3 weeks ago. I was more strategic, non-exec, kind of overseeing the operation. And when we received the news that our MD was handing his notice, it was like, well, one option is just let's shut the business. Do I need the stress? The opposite is, what happens if we just created a big mission out of this and an opportunity? And I came in as CEO and said, right, let's really take this business to the next level and grow it and have more impact with our customers. And, you know, so yeah, they were like two examples.
Interesting. So you kind of, you mentioned earlier when you're on the plane, you're in the Ritz-Carlton, and it's all super swanky, and you got your family there, but you weren't actually there.
Yeah.
Yeah. This kind of, and again, by the way, I have literally had not exactly this. I've been in a 5-star resort somewhere really swanky, right? And it's just the best place ever, and it's cost a load of money, but I'm not there. Like, I don't know where I was. I was wrapped in some kind of form of stress or detachment. And the point is, what you're talking about here is being present today with your own emotional state, with what's going on, being sort of slowing this down like a kind of Matrix time sort of situation where you're actually watching the bullets whizzing by your head, and you're able to sort of make a conscious choice, intentional choice, because you're present in the moment. Is that something? Is the work you've done sort of on yourself? Do you think is that something that sounds like is part of what you're doing?
Yeah, you speak to a number of entrepreneurs or people I speak to, is like, I can't meditate. They need an app. They need a this. They need a that. They need something to help them do that de-stress. So yeah, I've had the opportunity to develop lots of different practice. I lived in a health institute for 26 weeks. And so I got to experience lots of different types of work: breath work, meditation work, transcendental meditation technique, yoga, different forms of plant medicines and things like that. So one of the things that makes me feel great is being in nature. Shoes off on the grass. Cold water therapy, I love. It really brings present moment. You know, there's nothing else that matters when you're in a cold vat of water. There is, you know, the transcendental meditation technique is something I use because I don't need any complications or distractions to do that. It's just an inward mantra meditation. And so developing that stillness of mind is important. Journaling is another one. Is that I find writing quite difficult. And so that's an area of self-development that I've really had to if somebody asks me to write a blog, it takes me a long time to formulate that. That's why I've not written a book yet. But yeah, so writing is something that I'm practicing as well. So really just slowing things down. And most of the fear we feel is unnecessary. It is unnecessary, you know. Like, I had to really, like, there was times when I was in Florida in a health institute where I was like, I don't need to do anything. You should stop, you know, like really just stop, just be there, be present. And, you know, The Power of Now and all these books that you hear are amazing, and we all develop our own practice, and it's doing that practice that will bring us back to ourselves.
Fear is unnecessary.
Or necessary, you know, like sometimes if I'm feeling anxious or, you something is consuming my mind that is worrying. Say, I've got a bone marrow, I've got to postpone it because it doesn't work for me right now, and I need to postpone that till September after the event, which is a big decision, right? And there's one part of me that says this is a really good decision, and there's another part of me going, well, what if? And I'm like, and then it's telling myself, reminding myself of how far I've got, and you're just saying, look, that's not a fear you need to be worried about right now. Yeah. So it's just being really mindful of where we do feel fear in life is like what's necessary and what's unnecessary fear. Because most of the time, a lot of the fear we feel, and I tell my kids this, is that fear is, if they're feeling anxious, like we've had this coronavirus, people are worried about interacting with people, going places, going on holiday. And it's like, we don't need to feel this fear right now. There's so much of it out there, when in reality, it's just imaginary. It's not real fear because you are okay right now. You're safe. We have fresh air to breathe. We've got clean water to drink. We've got food to eat. We've got our essentials covered. We are okay. We're safe. We have money in the bank.
Yeah, it's funny, because I've really tried to stop consuming the news and stop engaging in political chitter chatter. Like someone said this and someone said that, and Twitter and all that. And it's just disconnecting from this sort of psychodrama that doesn't affect really anyone or anything in your actual world. And the perception of what has or hasn't happened and is that good or bad is a kind of just drama. This, and it creates a sense of fear. That's my point. Is this the fear, the anxiety, the kind of, oh my God, the world's ending because this has happened. This guy said something. And I've really tried to consciously disconnect from that. And I think it's something that, to your point, is right now, there's a lot to be grateful for. We have like you say, that you turn on the switch and the lights come on. There is clean water, and there's a lot of places that don't have that. So you can be very present, and with that, as a form of gratitude practice. It's like saying, okay, let's start from. There might be a lot of bad stuff going on, and a lot of challenges to face, and things that could go really wrong. But by the way, I journal every day. It's a practice called morning pages from a book called The Artist's Way, which I would highly, highly recommend. Basically, 3 pages of long form writing, just emptying your brain. But the point being is I try and, intersect there, like a gratitude practice of like things I'm thankful for, my health, I have that, and so these are things that people can take for granted. And I think what's interesting with what you've been going through is there's gradations of layers of crap to go through. Your early teenies version of crap was a lot more preferable to the late teenies version of crap that you had to deal with, I would imagine. I
mean, yes. When you say teenies, what do you mean by that?
Almost 20 teens, like just sort of like 2011 through 2010 through 2015.
Yeah. I mean, for me, just to be open, on this podcast, that there were, when you say what's the depth of darkness, like I used to go out and party. I was a big party animal in my 20s, university, and it was great fun. And I was a great guy to be around, and I was always center of the party, and probably, the person that got most people involved in things that they didn't realize were good fun at the time, and perhaps didn't want to endeavor in sort of drugs and what have you. Anyway, as I got into my 20s, because I was, and you were saying what was pre-cancer, as the kids came along, that became less of a thing. But I was definitely had addictive traits. I always went to work, never missed a day, never missed a beat. But when I did go out, it always ended up in a phase of isolation, depression, and almost debauchery, And the levels of guilt and shame that I held around some of the things that I did was, that's the bottom of the pit. Well, it was for me at the time. And so, at the time it was great fun, but then looking back, the aftermath was just guilt and shame. And it was almost like that some of that darker shadow energy, that need for validation, connection was it was controlling a part of my life, and I didn't have control over it. So yeah, I didn't go. I had some tapping once or twice, but it's not something I didn't take that as a serious issue. So if anybody is out there that is finding themselves that some of this shadow energy is driving some of these destructive behaviors, that is the sign of a mental health issue. Like, you might not be shooting heroin or drinking alcohol like an alcoholic would, but the experience of the activity is not an uplifting experience, particularly afterwards, where it becomes a depression. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if anybody is having that and saying, I want to stop doing that, then I think therapy or doing some deeper work, going on a men's retreat like, Men Without Masks, or, there's lots of really cool stuff in the UK now, where some of this work can be done to heal some of those demons.
Yeah. I think connecting with your shadow side, you being a badass and running around town and being all rock and roll, love all that, but it comes at a cost and a price. And often the things driving it, like you say, are unhealthy. And that's over and above the hangover. That's the deeper stuff. That's just the I have that self-destructive gene, blowing things up. From a deeper point, the business was just an expression of a deeper demon I was wrestling with.
Yeah, but I know some people that are out there still partying, I just don't know how they do it, 40, 50, and their sense of love of life, and they don't have that destruct demon energy that I clearly, that I did. And, long may the party continue,
Indeed. I ain't got a problem with partying. I just got a problem with my involvement with it. That's the problem. We're getting towards the end of the podcast here. We've got the last sort of couple of minutes, and
no problem.
There's a whole bunch of stuff there. The whole thing about being present, I think that is a really important thing. Like you say, like power of now, but being in the moment with your emotions, with the situation, with the family on the holiday. There's a depth to that that's could be seen as a bit, I did some journaling, meditation, but the presence has a depth, and so you can witness as you say, the dark energy, the drives, the sort of negativity, the urge to go and get shit-faced when you have a piece of good news or bad news, right? That's the thing you can observe when you are present. So these practices, like journaling and like all the things you talked about, are really healthy on multiple levels. Right, I've got 60 seconds here. I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody. Lots of advice out there for entrepreneurs. What should people ignore? What advice should they ignore?
When I wrote the brief for this, what I said is I've just read The Third Door by Alex Banayan, and an amazing inspirational story, particularly for anybody young listening to this podcast. And that we teach, you've heard of the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, and we teach that in some of the resilience training we deliver. And having been an entrepreneur and having lots of struggle and stress and challenge in my life, so I get held back by the failures, which I should embrace more. So, don't let failure hold you back. Embrace failure. Failure is the route to success, and I think that, the quicker we can pick ourselves up is a measure of our resilience. Because we're not being held back by the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment, the worry, the anxiety. So the quicker we can bounce back, the bounce back ability, and embrace failure, like, yes, I haven't achieved it yet. And, some of that language, some of that mindset is, so my big piece of advice is embrace failure. And that's.
I think that's great advice. for everybody. Like, embrace it. You know, the obstacle is the way, as I've said a few times on this podcast. And you know, and genuinely, I'm not coming at from a sense of I have all the answers. I'm literally wrestling with this every day. Literally, at the moment, I'm like, I'm freaking out about a few things, a lot of fear and anxiety rolling around. So this is natural and part of the process of entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, so much in there that's really valuable for people. So if people want to connect with you, because you do share a lot of great stuff, where should they find you?
Instagram is my main channel, Mark Bryant TV. So I can send you the link for that and share that. And then I can share you the podcast links as well for Terminal to Triathlon. So, and that is really to inspire, educate, and empower cancer patients or anybody on a healing journey. Because, yeah, a lot of cancer patients I come across they become disempowered with their healing journey because they're expecting somebody else to heal them, or the doctor or the oncology or the system or the process, when in reality, the person that's going to heal them is themselves.
Interesting.
So I heal versus you heal me. So, and had I not heard of somebody else that had overcome a terminal illness, I wouldn't have had the inspiration myself. And that's why I want to be public with what I have done and what I continue to do to help anybody else in a similar situation.
Yeah, I think these are principles that apply to anybody, even if you're not in a situation like with cancer or something. These are empowering messages, empowering things to take control of your own wellness, your health and well-being. So, like, really fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing with us. And please go to Mark Bryant TV on Instagram. I'll put all the links in the show notes. And please check out the podcast. It's a fantastic thing you're doing. So all the best for it. And thank you. And I'll see you next time, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye. Do you want to get the top 5 tidbits from each episode emailed to your inbox every Friday? Yes, you do. It saves you having to go through and make notes and make a note of all the books and all the ideas that are in the podcast. We go through and we choose the top 5 we like, plus put all the links into that email. So if you just go up to honeyblew-up-the-business.com, yes, that's honeyblew-up-the-business.com. And just enter your email address. There's a little box. Just enter it in and we will send you that information. And it saves you having to make notes and all that. That's make your life a bit easier. And of course, if you did enjoy the episode, please consider subscribing. We are trying to help people through this. So the more people that subscribe, review, rate on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, the more people will see it and the more we can help. So help us help other people, other entrepreneurs like you. And before I go, I've got to say big up to my company, the tech department, the company we blew up and put back together again. They're generously supporting me on this mission through the podcast. So if you guys want to have a look at a company that can really help you improve your technology, make it better so your business gets better too, boosting your sales and your profit and a bit more sanity in your life, a little less stress, then head up to thetechdept.com, the tech department. My company, give us a look. On behalf of all of us here, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.